The first story that I do want to dive into, this plane crash in Washington, D.C. last night. I was sitting on the couch just minding my own business. All of a sudden, I see on my Google card on my phone, American Airlines crash in D.C. And I couldn't believe it. I feel like it's 2025. Like, why are we still having plane crashes? And then I looked a little bit more into the story, and it appears that a Black Hawk helicopter crashed into the American Airlines plane. Now, this plane was carrying, from what I understand, 64 passengers so far. Last time I checked, they said there are no survivors. Now, this is going over the Potomac River. If you're familiar with the DMV, that's where my family is originally from. I'm very familiar with that spot. Ronald Reagan Airport there. Let's go ahead and dive into this. Now, Max Blumenthal pointed out something interesting. He said it looks like the VH-60 Black Hawk military helicopter is blindsided the AA flight with 60 plus on board. Seeing reports everywhere, it had its transponder off as it headed into heavy flight path. Completely outrageous. And of course, he's referring to this video here. Let's show this. And I'll show you something here now. Ignore this plane, okay? Because that's not the plane. Right here. Here's the helicopter, the little dot going right in. Kaboom, right there. So that's where it happened. And it's really sad, you guys. Like, I couldn't believe it at first. One of the things I do want to mention that they did announce today, before we get into the aviation expert conversation, apparently the pilots that were in the helicopter were wearing night vision goggles. And I don't know why. There are reports that said the sky was completely clear last night. But let's get into what the aviation expert said here.
Joining us now here on the scene, Mary Schiavo. She is a CNN aviation analyst, former inspector general for the U.S. Department of Transportation. We also have Cedric Layton. He's a CNN military analyst, retired Air Force colonel. Thank you both for being here with us on this morning as we cover this unfolding tragedy. And I do just want to reset for everyone who's waking up here on the East Coast. Mary, help us understand what happened here. We know these two planes collided. It's not something, thank the Lord, that we see very often in this country. What happened last night?
What happened last night is American Airlines being flown by PSA Airlines, a Canadair regional jet, 700, holds up to 70 people with 64 on board. It was coming into land, as happens, every few minutes, all the time. There were several planes in the air. It was a busy airport. I landed here myself at 7:30. It was very dark, very cold, a little bit bumpy wind, but weather wasn't really a factor in the accident. Also operating in the area was an Army helicopter. It is reported that it was a training mission. There were lots of helicopters in D.C. ferry around VIPs and all sorts of folks. But this was a training mission. The air traffic control tower specifically asked. It's reported, did ask the helicopter if the helicopter had this American Airlines flight in sight. That's very important. That's very telling. It's a key piece of evidence because the commercial passenger service aircraft are always under full air traffic control and what's called instrument air traffic direction. So that was flying exactly as the tower, or should have been flying exactly as the tower instructed. There's no indication it was not. So the helicopter was doing what's called see and avoid. The tower said, do you have this aircraft? And get in line or fly in behind it. So it was supposed to find this aircraft in the air, see it, and then fall in behind it.
And of course,
Okay, so let's go ahead and pause here because I know people have a lot of questions. This particular airport, the Ronald Reagan area, is a heavy traffic area. And this is something I think people have complained about before in the past. This is not a large airport. And it does have a lot of traffic that is coming through. So it's not unusual that there's helicopters in that area. And the sad thing about this is the plane was just about to land. Like they were almost on the ground. And this just goes to show you anything can happen. Anything. Because what do they always tell you when the plane lands? Don't they say, wait a minute, sit in your seat. Don't get out of your seat yet. Don't unbuckle your seatbelt just yet. Because even on the runway, something could happen, right? So it's just, it ate me up when I saw that footage and I saw just how close they were to landing. Let's go on a little bit more here.
You can hear the helicopters overhead right now, and just to give everyone a sense of where we're standing, we can also see the lights from the boats that are part of this search and rescue operation. At this hour, officials have not updated. We're still waiting to see at what point this may become a search and recovery operation, because again, we know that no survivors have been pulled from the water. But Cedric Layton, this river, it's an incredibly beautiful stretch, right? I mean, behind us also, I doubt the viewers can see it, but we can see the Washington Monument, the United States Capitol. At the other end of the mall is the Lincoln Memorial. This is a beautiful approach. If you're oftentimes, these small planes will take this absolutely beautiful approach down the river, past all of these gorgeous DC landmarks. The other thing we also know, Cedric, if you live here, is that there is constant helicopter traffic over this segment of the river. It's often extraordinarily low. I know when I sometimes have visitors in town, many of them are taken aback by how loud the helicopter noise is, how many there are, how low they fly. Tell us a little bit more about what this specific helicopter does, what the unit that was flying it does, what they may have been training for, and how this could have happened.
Yeah. And another thing I want to mention, I know many people are asking, why were they in that area anyway? I asked the same question. And apparently, I guess the facility, like their base or whatever, is also within that area. But this is an unusual practice for them. So that's another thing to me that was just kind of like, it really gave me pause.
Casey, this helicopter, the UH-60, which is a Black Hawk helicopter, belongs to the 12th Aviation Battalion, which is located at Fort Belvoir, Davis Army Airfield, to be specific. And what the unit's mission is to fly VIPs and other necessary things around the various posts and bases here in the DC area. They fly a lot of people in and out of the Pentagon. They fly a lot of special missions for various entities in and around the National Capital Region. And they also provide a service, a logistical service for the Pentagon and for other military units. So it's a critical unit, and it has had a very good safety record up until this particular incident. They've done a lot of training. There's been a lot of aerial activity in the last week to 10 days out of Davis Army Airfield and several other installations. So there's been a lot of practicing going on for these pilots. We don't know exactly what the nature of this mission was. It almost certainly was some kind of a training mission. We don't know whether the pilots were familiar with this area, if they had just been newly assigned to the unit, or if they were experienced pilots in this particular area. So these are things that are going to have to come out, but it is one of the premier units that ferries VIPs around. Luckily, no VIPs on board the aircraft, the helicopter that crashed, but that is always a big risk. And you mentioned a lot of helicopters around here. Go down any of the interstates in this area, and you will see the helicopters come in and out of some of the locations here. And we get used to it by being here, but there's always a danger in aviation, and that's something that we're seeing right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's always a danger with aviation. Now, I do want to bring up something else. Another thing that I read, it did say that apparently, I guess they were understaffed for traffic controllers. Traffic controllers, by the way, is one of the most stressful jobs in the country. It is not something that is just something that you can just, like, for example, you know how sometimes you might have gone to work or whatever, maybe a little hungover, or maybe you didn't get a lot of sleep the night before, and you can still kind of get by the day and do the job. Traffic controllers is not one of those jobs. That is a stressful job. So if they were understaffed, that in itself is also a problem. They're probably going to look into that as well to see if that played a factor with this. Now, the transportation secretary, who is Sean Duffy, and I'm sorry, I always laugh. And I know Sean has been a politician for a while, but to me, Sean, you will always be Sean from the Real World Boston. I always remember Sean from the Real World Boston, him and Montana and Elka and all of them. And that was one of my favorite seasons. So to me, I remember that Sean. Now I know Sean got married and has a family and all this stuff. He got married to Rachel from the Real World, San Francisco, but he always looks like Sean from the Real World to me. But listen to what he had to say here.
We wish we were gathering for different purposes today. I just want to let you know that the Department of Transportation, the FAA, along with the White House, President Trump, local, state, and federal partners, all working together on this incident in unison. I couldn't be prouder of this team that's been assembled, working tirelessly. Mayor, I want to thank you specifically for your work. A few details I'd like to give all of you, and some of you reported this, but last night, if you live in the DC area, you would know that this was a clear night last night. The helicopter was in a standard pattern. If you live in the DC area, you'll see helicopters up and down the river. This flight pattern is seen oftentimes when you live in DC. This was a standard flight pattern last night as well. The American airline flight coming into land was in a standard flight pattern as it was coming into DCA. So this was not unusual with a military aircraft flying the river and aircraft landing at DCA. And again, if you live in the area, you'll see that frequently with those two aircraft working together. As many of you have reported, we have located the two aircrafts. The fuselage of the American airline plane was inverted. It's been located in 3 different sections. It's in about waist deep water. So that recovery is going to go on today as that recovery takes place of the fuselage of the aircraft. NTSB is going to start to analyze that aircraft, partner with the FAA with all of the information we have to get the best results possible for the American people. I would just say that safety is our expectation. Everyone who flies in American skies expects that we fly safely, that when you depart an airport, you get to your destination. That didn't happen last night. And I know that President Trump, his administration, the FAA, the DOT, we will not rest until we have answers for the families and for the flying public. You should be assured that when you fly, you're safe.
And let's again remember the helicopter crashed into the airline, not the other way around. So from what I understand, that plane was split into 2. So they're still saying there are no survivors. I don't know if they've pulled bodies or from the river or not. I don't know, but they said that there are no survivors. And, you know, this is a tragic situation. This gentleman here, he was interviewed and he said, my wife was on the plane. So listen to this. I think he was trying to figure out if that was the same plane. Listen.
I'm just praying that somebody's pulling her out of the river right now as we speak. That's all I can pray for. I'm just praying to God.
When was the last time you spoke with her?
She texted me that they were landing in 20 minutes.
Can you show us a text message that you got from her?
Landing in 20 minutes. The rest of my text did not get delivered. That's when I realized something might be up.
Yeah. I feel really sorry for that guy. It's just really sad. Again, what drives me crazy about this is that plane was so close to landing. Now, I do want to point something out. Eric brought this to my attention. It appears there's something with the signal. It says, what is ADS-B signal? Black Hawk helicopter that crashed into American Airlines flight in DC was reportedly not using aviation technology. So I want to dive into this a little bit. It says that the collision happened, and it says here the rescue operations were underway. New reports have suggested that the military aircraft was not broadcasting ADS-B as per ADS-B exchange. For the uninitiated, ADS-B stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. It is a modern aviation surveillance technology used to track an aircraft's data, including its location, velocity, and altitude. So I thought that that was pretty interesting that it wasn't using that. Remember, they said that the pilots were using night vision goggles. Now, they said this was a training exercise. I don't know what they were training for. And honestly, we may never find out. But this is something I thought people should know. And it goes on to say here, this part right here, it says the data is further exploited to create a surveillance interface between the air traffic control tower and the aircraft. ADS-B multifaceted approach to procure data makes it comparatively more advanced and precise than traditional radar systems. So that is interesting. Furthermore, it has two distinct services, ADS-B out and ADS-B in. ADS-B out allows aircraft to broadcast information such as their location, altitude, and more to receivers like ATC towers or other aircraft. On the flip side, ADS-B in provides pilots with information about other aircraft. Although ADS-B in is not mandatory, ADS-B out has been mandatory for all aircraft in the U.S. and most airspaces since January 1st, 2020. And I think Eric's going to jump on to talk a little bit more here about the tech.
Yeah, so the ADS-B, it's using GPS and it's the standard now for aircrafts. But what you get into with this is that the helicopter was a military helicopter, and the military, as we know in most things, goes by their own rules, and so they don't have the same type of rules. If it was any kind of other helicopter, it would have, if it was a civilian helicopter, it damn sure would have had the ADS-B. They do have another system called MLAT that this article gets into a little bit, and the MLAT is an older system that uses triangulation and whatnot. I mean, part of this too is that a lot depends on where you're talking about that the aircraft is flying. So when jets and even helis and things are out in the open, then you get the ADS-B. It's like you might have seen Flight Tracker where you see them flying around and whatnot. And you have GPS and that tracks them. When you're coming into an airport, when it's takeoffs and landings, it's a totally different world. And in there, they're dependent on the tower, the air traffic control, to really track everything and make sure that there are no collisions and no big problems. And the ADS-B almost doesn't come into it as much near the airport. My understanding is it's more about the tower and the radar, and with and so it's generally up to the tower to track the planes, to tell them which runway to land on, and to keep them separate. The wrinkle here is, again, it's military aircraft, and so and it's a military heli. And so from what I'm reading, what I'm seeing, these military helicopters just make a habit of flying. I mean, that's part of what they do. They go up and down the Potomac all the time. And what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to stay low and stay out of the way. And they also fly by the woman on the earlier video called it see and avoid, right? They actually are supposed to eyeball the other aircraft and stay out of the flight paths. And so but I think what happened, from what I'm reading, what I'm seeing, is that this was a pilot error on the part of the military pilot of that helicopter. The air traffic control did all they could. They said, do you have the planes in sight? And they said yes. And then it's up to the pilot. It's really on the pilot to avoid other aircraft and do their route safely. The jet just was doing a pretty standard landing, and it might have been a somewhat unusual runway compared to other runways I read, but it was still pretty standard. And apparently, one theory that makes sense to me is that the heli pilot was watching the wrong plane. There was another plane that was coming in on one of the more standard runways, and the heli and so the tower says, do you see the plane? And the heli pilot is watching that one, and they say, yeah, I see it, I got it, and didn't see the other one. And it's easier to have happen than you think. I mean, you might think, how is that possible? But it's nighttime. You've got city lights all over the place.
Right.
And the other issue seems to be that the heli got too high.
Yes.
The other thing they're supposed to do is they're supposed to stay under 200 feet and just glide along the river. And so I think between those two things and just a lot of bad luck, I think they just flew right into the jet. There's also, and then there's also the kind of the greater issue of like, why do we have military helis, these helis flying under the flight path of landing and taking off jets? And that seems just inherently crazy, but it seems like what they do all the time, and usually nothing bad happens. And, maybe if we had an FAA that wasn't captured by the industry and did real safety regulations, maybe they would say, oh, we can't be doing this. It's mad unsafe. But, is the FAA going to tell the military don't fly there?
I mean, that airspace is small anyway. Like that's not a large airport. This point that Linda brings up, she said, so they share airspace, but do not even have systems that seamlessly work together. This is actually, I don't know if that's the case with this, but I will say it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for two different, entities to share a space and not actually work together. Like it's or have different, you know what I mean? Like have different systems that don't work together. Like it's not.
The big wrinkle here is that it's a military helicopter.
Right.
And both of those things play into it. You've got military who are basically cowboying it, doing what they want out there generally. And it's a helicopter flying low. And it's almost like a manual thing, whereas everything else happening at the airport is strictly under the control of the tower.
That's right. And another thing, okay, thank you, Eric. I'm gonna go to the other parts here. Another thing I want to mention too, because, and I'll get back to the whole decentralized part as well. As I told you guys before, they are still saying that there were no known survivors. And I want to get into one of the soldiers that was on that helicopter apparently went to Gwinnett County High School. I know where that's at in the Atlanta area. Soldier on Army helicopter in deadly DC crash, graduated from Gwinnett County School. So he looks fairly young. And his name is Ryan O'Hara. So he was one of the soldiers that was on the helicopter. So it's just all really sad. Now we got to get to this other part, because I've been seeing this everywhere, because now people are pointing out that the co-pilot was a female. Listen to this. The pilot in command of the Black Hawk that crashed into the passenger jet over DC was a woman. So you know what people are doing now, folks. You know what's happening. It says the co-pilot or pilot in command was a female. The official told Fox News she had 500 hours of flying experience. And then it mentions Ryan O'Hara as well. And so there were three of them. I think the other gentleman's name was Simon. This person here is pointing out that she was in training and that he was the chief pilot. So I don't know. There's information being like tossed around. I think people are trying to find a way to point fingers at this. And I have to say this. Donald Trump is already saying that this is because of DEI. And what I want to say is this. I can't believe that people are making this political right now. Number one, everything that goes wrong is not because of DEI. And I think that Donald Trump, I think you need to give an apology to the families. The number one concern right now should be these families are grieving. They lost their loved ones. I still don't even know everybody that was on the plane. Someone mentioned this in the chat and they said, have they released a list of the full names yet? I haven't seen a full list yet. Maybe when people see this clip on Friday, maybe they'll have it then, but I haven't seen a full. That's where the focus should be. It should be like, oh my God, these people died. And let's see, we can find out who everybody was and reach out to the families. That's where the focus should be. And I see Donald Trump making it political, and I see the Democrats trying to make it political in the other way. And that should not be the focus. And that just shows you how divided this country is. When a tragedy happens and people die, the focus should be on those people and their families, but people want to make it political. That's not cool. Not cool. So we have to get away from that. I did not like that at all. The other thing here I want to point to is what James Lee said. He brought up some really interesting points as well about that. And I think I have to say too, like, what people have to understand is that the military performs missions that are need to know basis. They're not always going to tell us what they're doing or why they're doing it. And as someone who grew up in a military family, I'll be the first to let you know, I didn't know everything that my family members did, when they were in the military. Like, again, like they keep these things like kind of to their self. And I guess, like for good reason. But so we may never really find out what the training was for or what it was about. I'm curious to hear the names of the people that were on the plane as well. Again, we did hear that the air traffic controllers, there was understaffing there. And because of that, yes, that is going to be an issue. Like I said, that is one of the most stressful jobs in this country. That is not an area that should be understaffed, that as well. But I think people are pointing fingers and they're trying to find, someone to blame. And I think, again, like, put the DEI shit to the side. You already made your executive orders to overdo that anyway. Put that shit to the side and let's focus on finding out who the people were who were on the plane and reaching out to the families and let these people grieve. Now, James said this, and I thought this was pretty interesting. Check this out.
So last night, a military helicopter crashed into an American Airlines flight, tragically ending the lives of 67 people on board. And already the internet is abound with theories about what might have happened. Was it a repeat of New Orleans and Las Vegas? Was it something about Saudi Arabia? Maybe even a shooting star or white orbs? Or was it DEI? Could it be one or any of those things? Definitely, maybe. But I have a sneaky feeling that when all the dust settles, the cause will most likely be some combination of decisions that were made in order to deprioritize safety and increase profits. Because near collisions happen all the time, especially in DC. This is an article from last April involving JetBlue and Southwest. Another one in DC, this one March of 2023, involving Republic Airways. Reagan Airport, DCA, is just one of the most trafficked air corridors in America. You not only have commercial planes, but you have military aircraft oftentimes flying side by side next to these commercial flights that are taking off and landing in DC. Yet last year, Congress authorized more flights to go in and out of Reagan Airport in DC. Why? Because Delta Airlines and other various airline lobby groups wanted them to do it, so they did. But at the same time, the country is short thousands of air traffic controllers. There are now reports that staffing was quote unquote not normal last night in DC and that there was only one controller instead of the usual two. I don't know, what can I say? They got to get better lobbyists, I guess. This is from a pilot, now turned whistleblower, describing an alarming situation at another major airport in the United States. Quote, I'm a pilot and received this email from an airport manager about an issue that has been a growing problem for years in the Bay Area and is now growing even worse. San Carlos Airport is an airport within 10 miles of San Francisco International Airport, and it will have no air traffic controllers starting February 1st. The departure route for San Carlos directly overlaps the arrival path of San Francisco. San Carlos also hosts two of the area's largest flight schools. This means you now have a situation where inexperienced pilots will now be departing into highly complex airspace using solely their own judgment and reading of charts so as to not collide with aircraft landing in San Francisco. This guy goes on to describe some kind of FAA contract bidding situation that resulted in all of this, but not ideal to say the least. So what exactly happened to cause this tragedy in DC last night? We don't know for sure yet, but to me, I think this is a clear indicator, one of the many indicators of an empire in decline, and we'll have to see if people want to fix it.
That is the great point there that I think we should all like leave with. You know, I said the theme is, oh, hell's no. Because when I heard this story also, I was like, oh, hell's no. Like, how does this happen? Right. But the point that James made there is very important, where he said at the end of the day, we are seeing signs of a declining empire. Now, Professor Richard Wolff has talked about this a lot, but it's not even just Professor Richard Wolff anymore. More people are admitting to the fact that, yes, we are a nation in decline. How is it that we don't have enough people to fill these positions for aircraft controllers? I mean, this is a, you know, there is something to be said about this. But one of the things I do have to say, my heart goes out to all of the, you know, victims' family members. I know Nancy Kerrigan was in an interview earlier. She said she knew some of the people that were on that plane. She said some of them were coaches. Nancy Kerrigan, a former figure skater. She said some of them were coaches and athletes from the figure skating community. And she was crying and just bawling. And I'm like, you know, these are people, like these are real people that have lives. And the last thing that people should be focusing on right now is, oh, it's because of DEI. Oh, there was a woman in there. How dare you? How dare you at this point? Focus on the victims. Get us the names so we know who was on that damn plane. Reach out to the families and let these people grieve. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.